Welcome back everyone, and to another video in the long series of beer and books with your friendly rambling haystack. That is me. And today I am trying to do that reader tag that Counselor Oxenseller has put out, because it's always good to do the homework your counselor gives you. And though I have a very fraught relationship with counselors, don't anger people who are in league with Moonspawn. It just doesn't, pay off that much. So let's try and do this as not rambly as possible. Cheers. So, first question is how did you find out about Malazan, the series? This goes back a long way. I think I first heard about it like around 2003, I guess. 3, 4. I was reading a lot of fantasy at the time anyway, and talking with a friend, and he was asking me about the Black Company, because I had read it already at the time, and said he'd heard about this other thing, also military fantasy, that's supposed to be similar but way more complicated, called Malazan Book of the Fallen, and I'm like, I want to check this out. Then it took a long time for me to actually do that. The main reason was that, I'm blind. I don't know if you actually noticed that, but yeah, I'm blind, so I'm kind of had to wait for it to actually be out in audiobook, because I don't read Braille fast enough to go through thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of that stuff. And buying a printed book and scanning it myself to then read it on my computer with a screen reader it's a lot of work. And so I didn't have a chance to read it for a long time, and I got super excited when Audible, announced the first audiobook, and I bought it immediately. And then obviously I had to wait more for the next one and the next one, and then suddenly, for whatever reason, Audible didn't sell a bunch of the books in my region, only in like the US, so I had to actually buy physical copies of MP3 CDs to keep on listening. And then suddenly they were back on Audible, and I got the rest, and listened to it on my phone, and basically binge listens to every installment when it came out. And then I had to wait half a year for the next one, which sucked. But yeah, that's how I heard of Malazan in the beginning, and then finally found out about it and got into it. Which brings us to the second question. What was your experience reading Malazan? Well, basically that. I started it, I got basically what I was hoping for. It was big, it was complex. I had read a lot of other stuff before, like not only fantasy, so some of the things other people have found problematic at the beginning didn't really bother me, and I was just like so hyped to finally get to actually read it / listen, that I think that excitement carried me through a lot of the early parts that some people find problematic or difficult to get through in Gardens of the Moon. So that was never a big problem for me. And then I just, continued. When and I was just like more and more amazed about all the things that happened, and that in the further on books, and how the world was like expanding even more, and all these other like interesting topics got drawn into this. That just, kept me enthusiastic about the whole thing. So when did I realize, question 3, that Malazan is one of my all-time favorite series? Well, relatively early on, I would say. Maybe not Gardens of the Moon, probably Deadhouse Gates, I think. It's like, as I said, I've read like a lot of fantasy before, and I noticed early on that this one was actually, scratching a lot of my reading itches that a lot of contemporary fantasy I've also read, I had read, didn't really give me that much of. It was more like complex. It touched on themes that a lot of contemporary fantasy didn't actually touch on for me. I liked all of that, and I said, "Whoa, this is something exceptional. This is something I can get, into and read again and again and again, and still get something new out of it every time I go back to it. And that's something that makes it very special. So that was basically when I realized it was something that would be one of my all-time favorite series. All right, next one. It's my favorite parts of Malazan. I think it would probably, or have I missed the question right now? I don't know. So, what was like my favorite ones? I think my favorite aspects are the more like the themes it deals with. Some part of the world building, yes, obviously, but mostly like the themes that it deals with, the way the deep time world building stuff that I recognize from like friends and I have in archaeology that I talk to and that kind of stuff. That those things, the way it deals with topics like religion, history, those because they are like near and dear to my personal interests outside of reading fantasy books. Mostly those, the overall plot and how it in the end kind of comes together is obviously another part that I really enjoy a lot. So not everything is perfect. Do I have what are my small gripes with it? Well, not there. That's something I really would need to think hard on because there's nothing that really stands out in a negative way. There's obviously, parts in the writing, in the story, in the books that kind of capture me less or that are more difficult to read. But then on like an intellectual level, I go back and it's like, the fact that it bothered me to read that is actually an interesting part because it tells me a lot about myself and about how I view the world. And then I'm like, so yeah, maybe the Felicin story is not actually bad. It's just that I have a lot of personal issues with survivors and weakness and stuff like that. So maybe that. So I go back and forth. It's very difficult for me to find something I really struggle with or that I find less good. I really need to think hard about that because not real gripes. I guess there's like some length in there somewhere in mostly Dust of Dreams. I guess that I kind of had to deal with. Like maybe I'll finally get them later on when I read it again. So who knows? But yeah, I don't have like major gripes or minor gripes with it. As I said, like some passages in Deadhouse Gates or Dust of Dreams are stuff that I struggle with from time to time. Yeah. All right. What was the next one? What's my favorite book and what's my least favorite book? I guess my favorite one is actually Midnight Tides. Maybe. Well, I know why. It's like some of the most poignant commentary on imperialism in there. Also, I like the Empire of Lether and Letheras very much because of its like Discworldy feel in a way. I do like that. I like the back and forth, the slightly absurdist back and forth between Tehal and Bug. That's something I really enjoyed a lot. And I like at the point in the series, it's just like a really nice change of pace that I really enjoy. What do I not? What's my least favorite book? Good question. Maybe, maybe actually Dust of Dreams could be. Again, it's kind of hard to actually, take Dust of Dreams as a single book because it meshes so much between with the other ones around that, like the Crippled God, basically. Yeah, I just remembered like one of the things that I didn't like that much was the way the some parts in Dust of Dreams around that rebellion, not rebellion, but that attempted coup kind of work. That's something I didn't enjoy too much, I guess. Anyway, So yeah, my favorite, my least favorite, my Midnight Tides, and probably Dusted Dreams. How many times have I read the series? I have read the main series twice by now, and I'm planning to go through it a third time very soon once I'm done with Chapter House Dune, which will hopefully be in like a week or two. I'm currently still in Heretics, but Chapter House is up there next, and after that I'm going to go back to Malazan, I think. So yeah, what else have I read from the Malazan world? I've read the main series of Malazan Book of the Fallen twice now. I have read The Path to Ascension, like the first three books, once. I've read the other Esselmont novels once, and I have not read Carcanas yet because I have this rule that I only read finished trilogy, like finished series, because at this point, yeah, I know I shouldn't have started Path to Ascension then either, I know, but I was already aware of like Walking Shadows being very delayed, and I'm not gonna start this until I actually know the third one is coming out soon and I can read all three. These are like Rothfuss Martin damages I'm still dealing with here. But of course, I'm planning to read it as soon as I can sort of see a light, a light at the end of the tunnel of the Carcanas trilogy. That's a bad way to put it. Sorry. Anyway, so that's how it is. I've not read the Bauchelain Cobblebrooch novellas because they are not available in audiobook, and the handwritten pages are basically impossible for me to access. So that's not gonna happen at this point. If they ever appear in audiobook, then I obviously want to read that as well. Listen, whatever you want to say. Yeah, what are my reading interests outside of Malazan? They're spread fairly widely, I would say. I have obviously read a lot of fantasy. Fantasy is one of my core genres I go to all over the place, like 1930s pulp stuff. I've read a lot of Robert E. Howard. I've read a lot of Fritz Leiber's Fafhrd and Grey Mouser. I've read Clark Ashton Smith. I've read some of the Cthulhu stuff. Actually, I've read like most of Lovecraft as well. So I've read like 1930s stuff. I've read some of the later on fantasy. Obviously, a lot of Tolkien. Contemporary fantasy, I do enjoy authors that have a bit more of a drive to them. Like, for example, Howard, who has this internal drive, or stuff like that. I enjoyed a lot the Land Fit for Heroes series by Richard K. Morgan, because it is fueled by anger, and I like it when authors are angry. Same for Cameron Hurley's God's War and other of her stuff that has this internal drive that I really not enjoy, but it kind of grips me. I read outside of like this, like obviously science fiction. I read that. I don't read not much horror, because it very seldom really grips me. One I always keep recommending to people and really enjoyed was Fritz Leiber's Our Lady of Darkness. That one is really good, kind of the book that Stephen King is always trying to write, I think. So I enjoy that. One of my all-time favorite series of all time, and probably even above Malazan, is Discworld. Terry Pratchett was an absolute genius, and his books are something I've read over and over and over again. Almost know by heart at this point. Then some, the more metafictional stuff like Thomas Pynchon, David Foster Wallace. I've read a bit of Cormac McCarthy. If you really want to learn about violence and war and stuff like that, read Blood Meridian. It's one of those things that will leave you changed ever after. stuff like that. And obviously classics like, Don Quixote, some of the Greek classics, Odyssey, Iliad, Virgil, the Roman stuff. That kind of stuff I kind of put in there as well because it, helps with my background in philosophy and history that I kind of pretend to study. I've read some, Milton and stuff like that as well. I'm generally very much into stuff that, like, authors that are actually good with words, like with language, which is something that not all authors are. Some are just great storytellers. And people who are good with language kind of fascinate me. So that's like the overall thing, I guess. So yeah, I read a lot. Yeah, what's my recommendation for new Malazan readers? Yeah, just go for it. Ignore what everyone else tells you. Just go in there open-mindedly. Don't bother with, like, don't worry if you maybe, don't understand something at the beginning. Just ignore it. Like, focus on the stuff that, like, interests you. If it's just the huge battles, go for the battles. Don't worry about the magic. Don't worry about the world. It's wizards throwing fireballs at each other. That's fun. Or it's cool dialogue and fun and games in Darujistan or stuff. Focus on whatever makes, like, really grips you, and let the rest, slide into the background until it also grips you, and that's gonna work. But don't listen to anyone who tells you it's too complex or whatever. Just, try it out, see what grips, see what doesn't grip you, and if it doesn't grip you at all, then, well, there's so many other books out there that might also be fun to read. So yeah, I guess that's like the 10 questions. Thanks for Counselor of Moonspawn to actually challenging us to this, and I hope you learned something from this or not about me. Anyway, cheers.